Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to the June 17th meeting of the Regional Transportation Commission. At this time, we're going to call the meeting to order. And Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Certainly. Christina Swallow. Hillary Sheevy. Here. Welcome. Christopher Dare.
Here.
Welcome. Neil Majardin.
Here.
Bill Thomas.
Here.
Adam Spear.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We need to do the...
Do I not get to?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Vaughn. I'm sorry, Vaughn. Vaughn Hartung.
On Zoom, thank you. I apologize for the interruption, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
And my understanding is that Commissioner Lucy is en route, so we will log him in when he gets here. Thank you very much. And yes, welcome Mayor Sheevy to the Board of the Regional Transportation Commission. We're so glad to have you.
So much. I'm very excited to be here, and it's so nice to see you, Bill. All these familiar faces. So I really look forward to being here. I was on this commission a long time ago, and so it's nice to be back.
Yes, and Mayor Sheevy takes the seat that was vacated by Oscar Delgado. So welcome, welcome. At this time, we'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. And if we could get Mr. Brian Stewart, who this is his last meeting, as I understand, if he would please give us the honor of leading us in the pledge.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. At this time, we're going to move into general public comment. Madam Clerk, I don't believe I have any general public comment at this time.
I do.
Oh, okay. We do have some general public comment. They'll come on down and we'll fill out a form. Good morning.
I don't have any other.
Okay, thank you. I do have another public comment, but it's for item 4.4, so we'll wait for that one.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Congratulations, Mayor Sheevy. Sorry, I have to get that out there. My name is Dora Martinez. I am totally blind, and I'm here just to say thank you for the Teamsters for getting to keep our awesome paratransit bus drivers on board still. And I just want to, we talked with some of the Bill Thomas the other day and Susie Trinidad, and we want to remind you all, please make the signage on the city bus station accessible for people who are legally blind, and also to have QR codes. So for me, if I can't see the sign, I can just point my phone to the pole for the bus route and know what's going on, what route that will be, or what time it will be coming, because you know, as a blind person, I cannot really trust anyone at the city station to ask to help me out, because I never know who I'm talking with, whether it's a security guard or just a random person. With all this craziness out there, I think it's a safety issue. Also, just to the MTM people, if they're sitting in here somewhere, please increase the ridership for the Star Van drivers so they could work on the weekend. I'm always being late to church and other events that I participate in. I took an Uber to DMV. Don't worry, I didn't get my license. It's my daughter. So after the permit test, we went out and I talked to the paratransit person. Oh, is my Uber coming? He goes, yeah, they're there. So I walk up to the driver and I said, are you for Dora? The driver goes, yes, but I'm not taking you because you have a service dog. We all know that's illegal under the ADA. But the driver said, I'm not taking a service dog. They should have told me. I wouldn't have wasted my time to come here. You know, and that's just something that we all deal with, or I do. But I was really wanting to have more paratransit drivers, because Uber and Lyft, I'm not, shading them or anything. Good for them for doing that work. But as a blind person, I'm a poor eyewitness for anything. So Ubers and Lyft, they don't have a background check like our paratransit and taxi drivers. They don't have a camera on their vehicle like the paratransit, and they're not held accountable. If I complain to Uber, it takes weeks for my money to get back to my account. With paratransit, thank God to Susie and Mr. Bill Thomas, it can be taken care of within a day. So please, when you take care of people with disability, you take care of all populations in this city. So thank you so much, and good to see you again, Miss Mayor. Thank you.
Great comments. Thank you, Dora. Okay. Madam Clerk, do we have any further general public comment?
We do not.
All right. Moving on to item 3, approval of the agenda. Director Thomas, do we have any modifications?
No changes, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. May I get a motion for the agenda?
Motion.
I have a motion by Mayor Shivi, second
Hartung.
by Hartung. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 4, consent items. Looking to members for items to poll. I will poll item 4.4 because we do have public comment on that item. Any other items that the board wishes to poll?
No, motion to.
Okay, motion to approve the remaining items, and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Item 4.4, we have public comment from Mr. Chris Fuqua. Good morning, Chris. Come on up.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members. For the record, my name is Chris Fuqua, Vice President of the Teamsters Local 533. I spoke to Dora earlier today, and I think one of the reasons why, from my understanding, why she didn't sign up for public comment is because she usually goes online to sign up for public comment. So I don't believe that needs to be taken care of. Make sure someone is in Dora's situation, she can sign up online to do public comment. So if you'd like to look into that, we'd appreciate it. As this board is aware, Teamster President Gary Watson and I negotiated collective bargaining agreements with both of your paratransit contractors, Keolis and MTM Transit. Between Gary Watson and I have almost 50 years of labor experience. MTM was a good steward of the paratransit from the get-go. They made their intentions clear on wanting to get a deal done as quickly as possible. MTM invested the time necessary to listen to the concerns of the bargaining unit. MTM was very responsive to those needs, unlike Keolis, whose goal was to break the workers' back at any cost. There are vast differences between MTM Transit and Keolis. One of those differences is that MTM's willingness to work with the union, where Keolis spares no expense at losing. On behalf of our membership, we are grateful to have come to agreement with MTM for 4 years. MTM was classy, respectful, and thoughtful of the workers and the needs of the passengers of our community. Through our negotiations, we were able to increase the starting wage over 30%. And on average, the bargaining unit employees at MTM, our Teamster members, received a 20% raise. Our members will also be seeing as savings on their health and welfare, as well as good increases to their pension. Teamsters Local 533 will not tolerate hired contractors that disrespect and bully our members. We hope that you share the same vision for our future, so that this region will not be impacted negatively by labor disputes. In the future months, we hope it's the union's hope that when you look at responsible transit contractors, you look towards the predictive model that MTM Transit has brought forth. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. So on item 4.4, may I get a motion?
A motion to approve.
I have a motion and a
Second Hartung.
second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. All right, we are moving on to item 5.1. Acknowledge receipt of the RTC strategic roadmap for fiscal year 2023.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item, I'm going to ask Eric Olson with On Strategy to start the presentation. As you'll recall, we engaged Erica to help us do our strategic plan. I would say before she starts that this was a intentional effort to try to bridge in a better way the desires and vision of the board with the staff actions at RTC. So this is a new document, a new process we've started. And I've asked Erica, this is, I think, the third or fourth time we've talked about this. So some of this is going to be a little bit maybe repetitive, but it is important for all of us to be on the same page, that we remind ourselves of what we're trying to do and where we're going. So with that, Erica, if you wouldn't mind starting off.
Good morning. Is the mic hot? It's on? Okay, awesome. Good morning. Thanks for the time. Erica Olson for the record. As Mr. Thomas just mentioned, we are coming back to you with what we're calling a strategic roadmap for the next couple of years for the organization. So I'll talk through that just a little bit, and also for our new board members, we'll walk through how we got here today as well. Just really briefly, I will do some stage setting and then pass it to Mr. Thomas to dig into the detail. Or if we could just advance to the next slide, that'd be great.
I think it goes slow.
And there's a slight delay. Okay, perfect. Awesome. Thank you. So here's our quick process, just to recap everybody. We started this process last December, about 6 months ago, gathering perspective from all of the board members, what were on your minds in terms of big strategic topics that you felt like you wanted to have conversations about, that RTC needed to be thinking about, planning for, making decisions around. So that happened in December. That was the frame for the retreat that we all had in January. I'll talk about that in just a minute. Based on that, we did a bunch of work with staff to pull together the direction from that retreat, and start to outline what a plan might look like, or high-level priorities. We came back to you with a summary of that in March, and then today we're looking at a document that's a bit more formal and a bit more put together, detailed than it was in March. And that is in your packet. It looks something like this. And it says, strategic roadmap. And we're calling it, just to say this out loud, we're calling it a strategic roadmap instead of a strategic plan, because RTC has quite a few really important long-range planning documents. The RTP, TOPS, the financial plan, budgets, all of those key documents that are also strategic documents for decision-making and planning. And the purpose of this document is to pull together a cohesive view of the organization's priorities, inclusive of some of those big areas that you all wanted to move forward. So these documents all work together. That's why we're calling it a strategic roadmap.
So Erica, if you might just tell the staff to move it. I think that's a little quicker. We're not going to use these.
Perfect. Awesome. We'll stay right here. Great. So the key themes that came out of the conversations from the board, from the retreat, from all of the work with staff are these 5. And then we pulled these into the document that Mr. Thomas is going to walk through. So you asked really clearly to re-envision and rethink about public transportation, demand, access, technology. You'll see the goal around that. You'll see the really detailed work that's happening with the TOPS process right now, of course. Another key theme, of course, is to look at how roads are regionally planned for, developed, and maintained, RTC's role, the local jurisdiction's role, what is the state's role, what does the collaboration look like, et cetera, just to rethink about that as our region is growing and shifting and changing. Getting prepared for, as the organization always does, but putting a spotlight on the shift that's likely coming with future funding sources and what those strategies might look like. It continued at even more proactive planning for our transportation network, envisioning the network of the future. What is that we want for our community? And then together, just having a cohesive view of the organization's priorities related to the thoughts from the board, staff, partners, and the community. So that's really the purpose of this document. And Mr. Thomas is going to walk through how those themes turned into goals, objectives, and KPIs.
Thank you, Erica. So I wanted to start with the first of the 4 goals. And what I'm going to do as I talk about these is just reiterate what they are and what they mean. And then a little bit more background for the board in terms of how to consider these. The objective today would be for all of you to make sure that you confirm this is exactly where we want to be on these strategic goals, and secondly, to add information to us if it looks like we've we need to embellish or we need to clarify a little bit of where we're going. So not surprisingly, with all the things that have happened in the last couple of years between the pandemic, the labor shortages, gas tax right now, inflation in general, there's a lot of things going on that necessitate us to be very conscious of the dynamic world in which we live, not the least of which is our public transportation system. So what we heard from the board and what we've captured is that you really want us to look at the whole system. It's been around, I believe, since the maybe late 70s, early 80s, and obviously the times have necessitated different levels of service and how we provide this service. But right now, what seems to be wise, what you ask us, is really think about it as a system. So not just the fixed route system, but everything we do. And so what we've come back with is the outcome we're looking for is we really want to design a system and maintain a system that meets the needs of everyone who needs it. So in other words, starting with the people who don't really have an option and they need to use our public transportation system. And really what you're going to see in the TOPS as that comes forward in the next month or so is focusing on the suite of options. So what we've learned through all of this is we can't just be reliant on one thing. We have to really be resilient. We have to be resourceful. We have to find out how do we use all these tools. You heard today mention of Uber, which is certainly not a public transportation system, but certainly part of the transportation network that strategically we can use to help people get around. And that is the end goal. How do we help as a public agency people who need help getting around do that? The things that we're going to do specifically that I want to share with you is we're obviously going to be looking at technology. Our world's changed a lot in terms of smartphones and how people get information, how people make decisions. So we're going to keep our eye on that, looking at apps, looking at things that we can do to help people be in a better position to, again, get the service that they need. We're also going to be looking at pushing out service so we make people aware of what's available. And then we're also going to put an element of marketing in there, is to make sure people are aware. As all of you know, a lot of times people don't know what's available, they don't understand how to use it, so we're really going to focus on those things. The last thing I wanted to say about this one is that we will really be flexible, and our success will be based on, in great part, the customers being flexible too. In other words, as we use these suite of options, they're not all the same. None of them is going to replicate you having your own car driving when, how, where you want, but that would be our goal. And we'd like people in public transportation to feel like they have some control and influence, but at the end of the day, it's just an awareness that to provide a community resource, it doesn't necessarily, nor could it probably match up with somebody having their own vehicle doing it the way they want to do it. And that is really our struggle, because in the world of public transportation, that's what people want, but we can't really give that to them. So how do we marry up their needs with our ability to be a most flexible and responsive service is where we're going. So the TOPS plan, again, which I said earlier is going to be coming to you, is really going to be the document that manifests the actions and gives you the opportunity to give us direction on where we're going and how we're going to respond. So the next goal is a very large one and a major undertaking that you've asked us to do. And so how I would describe this is, just as it says here, focusing on transportation decision-making, development impacts, and the future of our community. What we heard from you as a board is that we need to revisit how we respond to the growth of the community as RTC and how that growth of the community relates to our infrastructure, our roadway system, our public transit system. So we're going to do that with an outcome to clarify and potentially redefine regional relationships. I don't think we're naive in going into this, that this is not a very complex and difficult thing to address, but we are going to start an effort with our three regional partners in Ndot, and also the federal agencies to really focus on how do we do what we do. A lot of what we do in the responsiveness to growth in the community is based on historical actions and historical practices. And sometimes, as you know, we can forget why we're doing what we're doing, and it's good to go back and see, is that really the right way or the best way to do it? So that's what this is going to be. We will make sure that we really kind of focus on three things: new roads, improvement and expansion of the roadway network, and then maintenance of existing roads, because that's part of it too. It's not just about building it, but what we're going to do to maintain it, because its maintenance is critical to the people being able to get around. So it's really going to focus, I guess, in summary, on the system growth and capacity and the character of that capacity and how it affects people, and really focusing ultimately on the experience of the individuals who use our transportation network. So those two are underway, and we will be coming back to you this year with some reports on those two items, not the least of which is the TOPS, which is near term, and then this report on goal number 2, which will probably be coming in this year. So as I move on to goal 3.
Director Thomas, may I
Yes.
interrupt? Was it your vision on this presentation that we have comments or questions as we go along, or wait until the end?
I would leave that to you. If you feel like, as we're talking about each of these 4 goals, that it's probably, it would be most successful for you to talk about it while you're thinking about it, then let's do that.
Okay, so I would turn to the board and see what their appetite is. I know we have gone over a lot of the details underneath each one of these goals more than once, but for the benefit of our new member, I didn't know if anybody wanted to provide any further detail on any of the items, or just wait until the end and then we can kind of just loop back. Is that the preference? Okay, so.
I'd like to ask a question, Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Hartung.
So on goal 2, Mr. Manager, how do we figure out with the municipalities, Washoe County, City of Reno, City of Sparks, how do we figure out to respond to pre-growth? So where we're looking at developmental applications or even land use changes long before anything comes in. And then the second question is can we create a working relationship or potentially a new standard in the region whereby either we or and I would love it to be us, but it's probably going to have to be the municipalities that do this, where we don't allow, and I'm sorry about this if any developers are listening, where we don't allow them to submit traffic studies where we do a traffic study or the municipality enters into that traffic study.
Short answer is our goal would be to be more forward-thinking, as you've mentioned. The challenge of that, of course, is going to be that as the community expands and changes, there's a lot of incremental decisions that are made by private parties that influence how the community moves forward. So our goal would be to be in a better place with our regional partners on forward thinking. It may mean that we have to do things different as an agency. For example, we might have to get ahead of roadway needs by getting right-of-way well in advance of when the road's needed. Just as an example, but those are the kind of conversations we're going to have, is how do we, I think it's pretty clear to us what the question is. What's not as clear is what the answer is that would be not only palatable in terms of the way the local governments do their business, which we're not trying to inject ourselves into, but also one that actually would get some results.
And on the right-of-way acquisition, if I may, Mr. Thomas, I'd like to know what requirements would have to be met for NRS, and what might need to be changed in NRS for how long we could hold that right away.
We will certainly answer that question as we come forward. Our process is going to be starting with the 3 local governments to do interviews with the key players, and we've already started that. So the first step will be to get an assessment of what our world is today. And out of that, hopefully, will come some ideas and some thoughts about how we can be in a better place. But we will certainly be doing that. If right-of-way is one of the things we need to do, then we'll be answering those questions about what are we allowed to do by law, what laws might need to change if we're trying to get to a different place, and then what would it take to change those laws.
Okay. And then potentially even on that same conversation, how we can interact with developers to acquire the needed right-of-way ahead of time. So and maybe they just hold it. We force that in their developmental plans or something of that nature. I don't know what the solution is, but I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, absolutely. And just to kind of dovetail on that comment, I think the the relationship that Director Thomas and the RTC has with the 3 jurisdictions is critically important to developing what that future looks like. I mean, the jurisdictions know what projects are on the horizon that are coming in, that are potentially in the works. And I think, I mean, I'll use Verdi as an example. That has a kind of a fixed build-out capacity plan whereby the infrastructure, the road infrastructure can be made to fit that, because we kind of know what's going to be occurring there. And I think we're moving in that direction. And I think just having those active discussions with the jurisdictions is going to be hugely helpful, but also understanding that we're working with the developers, to Commissioner Hartung's point, to start doing a few more things in anticipation of rather than in reaction to. And then you're having to go back and modify and buy properties that's a much higher rate. That's not good. And I think the other thing is this ties right back into your goal 1, which talks about the fundamental shift. What I believe we discussed during our strategic planning sessions was, for RTC to stop trying to be all things on all roads and being good rather than great. In other words, maybe the McCarran Loop shouldn't have protected bike lanes and walking lanes. Maybe that becomes a capacity road. Don't at me and send me emails, please. I'm just using it as an example. Maybe we need to focus on Reno picks its 3 roads that they believe need to be the full menu of multimodal opportunities, and the other roads, as we move forward, we designate the capacity road versus the more appropriate and safe multimodal road, where we can be more strategic about making those roads really robust and protected and safe, and capacity roads are capacity roads, and rather than trying to be all things on all roads, which is expensive and it doesn't always work. So I think you working with the jurisdictions and having those relationships is key, and because the jurisdictions know what's happening.
And Madam Chair, I've got comments on goal 1, but we can come back to that just in terms of transit and how we've responded in the past. And there was a public comment that was sent to us, and it's something I've been saying since I got elected, talking about light rail and some possibilities how RTC might play into that. But let's let Mr. Thomas keep going, and then maybe we'll come back and have that conversation if it's possible.
Okay, sounds good. Back to you.
Okay, so moving on to the 3rd goal, and just to reiterate, goals 3 and 4 were, as you'll see, of significance and size that we were unable to this year focus on those, and so we're going to be coming back to you in the coming year to focus on these 2 goals. So the end objective would be to have all 4 of these goals addressed in a manner that clarifies what we're trying to do and where we're going. But these second 2 goals are ones we're going to need your help with, and we're going to be working with Erica to help you solicit what these mean and where we're going with them. So the first one, which really came from all of you, is to look at the overall network. Like, what is the experience? What do the people who use the network experience? And how are we sensitive in terms of how we're addressing the transportation network based on people's experience? So really, the outcome we're looking for is a diversified network that we can expand with mode choices. So not picking any one mode, but being really sensitive that there's multiple ways people get around, and kind of playing off of what Chair Jardin says is really being intentional in where we use which modes for what purpose, which means that not all parts of the community are going to be the same, and some areas might need a different transportation tool than others. And we're going to do that through our RTP process. So last year we completed the 4-year cycle of updating, and this is perfect timing to get ahead of next update to really vet out and pull forward where we want to go as a community. And this will be really important for us to look at the world as it's changed, where we want to go, and to do that by providing guidance when we get to the RTP process, where we can go out to the public and other stakeholders and share with them the vision we're trying to aim for with our transportation network. There are some specific questions that we're going to ask you to consider. And I'm just going to read those off as best I can. I probably should have reader glasses because it's tiny, but there you go. Yeah, yes, much better. Oh, yeah, I'll use yours. I don't want anybody to take a picture of that.
You're not cool now.
So, I'm not as cool, but I can read. So the 4 questions that I would like, or we would like you to start considering, you don't have to answer them today. In fact, it's probably good to mull these over, is what do we envision as a future network? And part of what we're going to be doing is scenario planning when we do RTB, which is something we haven't done in the past, to really look at, what are the different outcomes and visions and what would they mean in terms of how we provide our roadway systems and our services. How do we factor limited labor, human resources into a fiscally constrained plan? Because we know from every indication we've got that we're going to be going into a period now where the fiscal dynamics are going to be changing, and that means we have to be responsive to that, not the least of which is labor availability and labor costs and how those relate to our ability to get things done. Should we be trying to match project output with forecasted revenue? In other words, moving more towards when we have revenue come in, what are we going to get for that expenditure in terms of output and the performance of our transportation network? And then lastly, how can we define our funding allocation to provide the right balance? And what we mean by that is the capacity versus the multimodal versus the maintenance. We obviously don't have enough resources to do everything exactly as we'd like in all 3 of those areas, but it's really going to take some forethought and strategic conversation and decisions to make sure we balance those properly. So that is goal 3. And then the last one, which I understand we're going to talk about all of them afterwards, is the 4th goal, which we're calling being proactive in planning for our funding needs. And what we mean by that is really focusing on our financial plan and being intentional how we're spending our money and where we're going, and probably most simply put, setting aside buckets of the funds to make sure that we're allocating the money for the things we want to see happen, not by coincidence or by inadvertent action, but with intent. And in this particular case, the 4 questions that we've identified are, what's next after fuel tax? We know right now that there's a conversation going on at the state level in terms of what happens with EVs and vehicles that are fueled with things other than fuel, petroleum fuel. And we also know, with gas tax being, or gas rates being what they are today, that's going to change the way people's behaviors and how they move around, and what's that going to do to our fuel tax revenue, which is really the main thing that we use to provide our service and our roads. How do we proactively plan for changing commuting behaviors also? And as I just said, a lot of what's going on today is probably going to change the way people move around, and so we have to adapt to that, and we have to design our financial system to support and facilitate that. How do we view the commissioner's role in the budget process? So that's more specifically looking at how all of you are participating in our annual budget, which is our short-term plan. But as a capital agency primarily, it's more than the 1-year budget that really is important, because many of our projects are multi-year. The third one is, how do we measure financial success? So really intentionally looking at what we're trying to do with money and how do we know if we've spent it right. And then lastly, do our financial documents provide you a clear picture of the agency's financial health? And of course, related to that would be the public's, being transparent and the public understanding what we're doing with the money. As a general comment, I would say that there's a history more recently of looking at RTC as an agency that's doing well financially, and so the tendency is to heap more and more things on to what we do with the money that the public has given us, and it can come, if we're not doing it by design, at the expense of providing our core services and our core functions. So that's going to be the dialogue as we get into this one. And of course, with all 4 of these, we'll be working very closely with Ndot and the 3 local governments all the agencies that are involved in the transportation network to get clarity on how we best serve the public with the limited money they give us. So I will stop talking now and turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. I will turn to my commissioners and ask if they have any input or questions. Again, this is just kind of the very first, very high-level discussion on this, and we will obviously dive much further into it as we move forward. So just looking at my commissioners, Mayor Sheevy.
That's exactly what I was asking. This is just sort of broad, and then we will really get into the meat and potatoes of sort of disability transit and the micromobility and those kinds of things. I mean, more now than ever, people are really wanting to use alternatives, right? Especially with gas so high. So so that's good to know. I don't want to get into it now, but I'm excited too to sort of get the feedback from all the other jurisdictions to see, because I know where my head's at, but it would be interesting to know where is everyone else's head so that we can collaborate once we all sort of know and check the temperature, which we haven't done in a long time, so I commend you for doing it. It kind of brings us up to, current state and temperatures of what we're sort of dealing with. I think we've kind of been a little antiquated when it comes to that, so I'm really glad to see that. So good job. That's it.
Yes. Commissioner Day.
Yes, I'll just comment on a couple things that were shared. One is I think we walk through seasons of change, and we're definitely in one of them. And so what we've done in the past, it's good, and we did exactly what we should have done, or close to it at least. Nothing's perfect. But I do think it's important to stop, evaluate. And I really can tell you, like our flex ride that we are doing in Sparks, it's been great. Actually, it's been such a very good tool for our people. And I'm just looking, if this recession and what it's talking about is going to hit, it's going to hit some of our most vulnerable population, and we know this. And we know if we could figure out how to show them how you can save $200 or $300 a month by using public transit, we can really be a factor in getting through this in a way, because people have to have transportation or they can't work, and then that messes up everything, childcare, you name it. And so I think getting ahead of it, making sure we can market a plan, but it sounds weird, but sometimes it helps to really spell it out. I won't get to be a part of some of those conversations because Mayor Lawson sits here, but I would ask that we really look at how to lay out the savings. And I was talking a little bit to the manager just yesterday about this, but just if you really look at it, if someone, instead of going to buy a car right now, really looked at public transportation, and we made sure we had the flexibility to be there for them, how much could they really save by using this service to that capacity? I mean, we don't have subways right now. We don't have, all that kind of stuff. We know that. But what if instead of that, we had the ability to offer so many rides where you can get to and from work and to a grocery store for this much, and then you compare it? I think people might really look at it. I just think it's important. I'd also say for growth when it comes to roads, I mean, obviously we're all vying to do all we can about traffic. It's getting worse. We have growth happening, and so it's a must. But I do think the more we lay down what we think is, and it's not necessarily just restrictive, but it's the guidelines for a community. It really helps, I think, guide our developers what our expectations are. And then even as you come back to us as city council, we know the expectations. So if they're going out of expectation, we can be like, what are you doing? It's not really helping us when you do that. But if we don't lay that out ahead of time, every time we're kind of relooking at a new idea. So I really like the idea that you'd put some stuff out in front of it. I'm real concerned to make sure that we utilize grant money, and part of that's going to require, in order to do federal grant money for some of this, and I know you guys, we do a lot because I've seen a lot of grants come through, but I don't know how much grant money we are using and functioning with our vulnerable populations for these flex rides. And I think that would be a good way to do that as well. I think my final thing I'd like to say too is, and it's a question, do we have a BDR or can be a part of BDR for the tax on EV? I mean, I know we've talked about this for years. This is not a new conversation, but we are definitely walking into a season where typically those with EVs can afford to help, and right now they're kind of getting a free ticket in a sense.
Can we hold for a half a second? We're going to pause. We're having an issue with with Commissioner Hartung, so we are going to pause for a minute while they get him on the phone.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you. So we are.
Can't hear you guys, so I have no idea what Christopher said. I'm a little frustrated at this point.
Christopher said you're amazing, and
Yeah. Okay.
We paused for a second to do
said
this.
we actually just paused. Commissioner.
And one of the biggest things I mentioned is just the greatness I really believe that the Flex Ride has brought to Sparks, and really looking at making sure we dive into that a little deeper and making sure we're there. Obviously, we're all very concerned about what this next couple of months and year or two might hold when it comes to recession, gas prices, and that, because that affects everything from store prices to you name it. And definitely, there's a lot of our population, all of us are going to be affected by it, but some will struggle to the place that beyond where they can handle it. And we want to make sure that if this can be an area that we can come in and show the savings. And so that was one of the big pushes I talked about. I did talk about development real quick. Just the more we can lay out some of our best expectation, best practice, I think ahead of time and do a layover, it helps guide not only developers, but also city council and county commissioners, all of us, to stop and look and say, wait, if this is best practice, why are we stepping out of best practice in order to do what you want to do? And it doesn't mean we can't change. It still gives us at least some guidance. And then I did have a question regarding our EVs. When it came down to it, do we have a BDR that we are a part of sponsoring? Can we consider that? I don't believe we have time to wait. I know that as a state, many times there's a big push to try to get people to move over, so they're using this to incentivize. But we're at a place we can't wait for that, I believe. So that's really my main question.
So fortunately, I can answer that real quickly before we go to more questions. Director Swallow and her staff are leading an effort statewide to deal with that issue. So I believe, and she can certainly talk about it in her report, but we're on track to have something ready for this session. We do have, because of some changes that happened in the last legislative session, one BDR that we can put in. But I think this particular issue really is bigger than just Washoe County. It's one that needs to be dealt with statewide, and I think it is. So the answer is yes.
Thank you very much. And just a couple of comments. I think, Mayor Sheevy came on at a great time, because she's, RTC in all aspects is at a completely changing moment. Everything about the way RTC operates, both on the road infrastructure side to the transit side, is at a time when everything is changing, and we are positioned to completely reform and reshape how all of those things and services are delivered. And, as an example, I think the technology and education are the two things that are going to drive particularly the transit side. There should be a way to customize, and I'm hoping through technology and education we get there, to customize the user transit experience to fit what their specific need is. We have so many options, whether it's the mass bus transit, Flex Ride, Vanpool, Uber, Lyft, and taxi bucks, access, even scooters and even bikes, to say, here's what my transit point A to point B is for today, and they can go on a platform, and we can customize and say, based upon availability and, from where you're going from and to, this is your best option, and here's the timing for it, and boom, it gets logged, and whatever the most appropriate for your condition is, shows up, and gives you that direction. So I think we're at a point where we're gonna bring all those different options together, and I'm excited for that. But it is gonna be an education, for sure. We have to have the budgetary line item to back that up, because I'll give an example. So we have a number of senior complexes in the community, and when we first started talking about some of the routes maybe being reduced or eliminated and maybe being supplemented by FlexRide, the initial reaction, as you can imagine, change, particularly in a senior population, is scary. And there was resistance. And then RTC did a very robust educational on-site effort. And the seniors in those complexes now are very excited about FlexRide because they understand the benefits and the conveniences of it as compared to maybe a fixed bus route. But they needed that education, and they needed the telephone platform and the here's what it means and here's the changes. But we're going to have to dedicate significant dollars behind that part of it. And then we do need to talk to Mayor Shivi's point about the micromobility, is that needs to be, in my opinion, a dedicated, ongoing, budgeted line item, not something that every year someone has to come in and ask for from some other bucket, how are we going to pay for the whatever? I think we're at the point where if we're going to have these roads that are dedicated as multimodal and they're augmented in a new and most safe way, that we're not having to go back and find the money from somewhere else, that it's a dedicated line item. So that's my 3 cents. Commissioner Hartung, did you have any further comments?
I do indeed, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll start at goal number 1, rebuild public transportation system, or the public transportation. I think our board has done a good job, and thank you, Councilman Dare, and Madam Chair, for the acknowledgement of FlexRide. FlexRide, I think, is ultimately a game changer. But one of the questions that we had in a public comment in a letter was thinking about light rail, and something that I have said for a long time is, this goes into item number 4, which is financial and organizational stewardship, because it may be cost prohibitive to think about light rail. But if we used the center of McCarran, where you had 4 legs that just went between each one of the freeways back and forth, and then ultimately coming in from the North Valleys and, say, Spanish Springs and South Valleys, where you would have a sort of a single connection that would take you to that central hub, and then from that hub you'd work your way around the city, and then either flex or fixed could run you into the city. It would be interesting just to see what the cost would be and what alignments might look like. And I don't want to spend a huge amount of time on it because it could be cost prohibitive, because we haven't been doing it for the last, say, 50 or 60 or 100 years. When you look at some of the places around the nation that have had rail in place forever. So it becomes a little problematic. If we had the track in place, rail would be a piece of cake. So that's the first thing. But I do think that FlexRide is the wave of the future, and I think it's a very successful model, because, to your point, Madam Chair, we have a lot of senior facilities, and that's a growing community, and it will continue to grow. All of us are getting older, some of us faster than others. I'll just say that, and I think it's a good workable model. So let me go down to item number 3, improve our community's network experience. One thing that, Mr. Thomas, you and I have had this conversation more times than I want to enumerate, and that is, and I'll speak my frustration again, where we'll do a project and we won't go far enough. And I'll use Pyramid and McCarran to that example. We knew at the time that we needed to take that third lane heading north all the way at least until Disk. That we knew it. And although the engineers showed me models at the time and they said, oh no, this is going to work fine, we quickly found out that those models were wrong. To the statistician George Box's point, all models are wrong, some are useful. And now we have to go back and retrofit at many millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, just for that one little leg to get us to Los Altos now. And so, and I could cite other examples, but I'm not going to. There's no reason to bash people, but I think in many cases we don't go far enough in terms of our planning to say, would it be actually cheaper to spend a little more money now than it will cost us in the future to retrofit these projects? And so those are my comments initially, and then those all fall back into financial and organizational stewardship, because I get sometimes, an extra $20 or $30 million on a project can be prohibitive. So we do have to look at that, but I think we know that the need, it's not if the need will come, it's when the need will come, and how we make that investment initially. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And to that point about the fiscal part, I mean, we have to be realistic that, we're seeing in all of our jurisdictions projects that are coming in 30, 40, and 50% or more above the engineer's estimate consistently. So we have to imagine projects that we do are going to probably follow that trend, and that's a scary prospect. But we have to budget for it because that's the realities. So, okay, with that, Director Thomas, what else do you need from us at this time?
Can't see my light. I think at this point, what you've given us is very helpful in moving it forward. And just to reiterate, we're going to take your comments today. We're going to be coming back with goals 1 and 2 in the near term. And then we'll be setting up a conversation probably early part of next year to go through 3 and 4 and have a really in-depth conversation on those 2 items where we, focus on the questions I read to you, which we'll share with you to start thinking about, as well as other ones that may come up when we look at those 2 subject matters. So for now, it's just acknowledging the report, and we've captured your comments.
Okay, so I need a motion to acknowledge the report with the supplemental comments made by the board.
I will motion.
Okay, I have a motion
Second.
and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Okay, we are on item 5.2, approval of the RTC goals for fiscal year 2023. Director Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Denise, am I using this now, or? Okay. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So what we're doing with this particular item is sharing with you the goals that we are going to be using. Most succinctly, this is how we measure when we come back to you each year, our success as an organization and staff on completing the things that you set out for us as the tasks to do in the upcoming year. So in your packet and out there for the public are 30-plus specific goals. So I'm not going to go through all of them today. They're, like I said, they're in your packets. But I did want to touch on a few of them, maybe the ones that are maybe a little higher awareness, just to let you know what we're looking at in this coming year. So as far as design, the 4 biggest projects that we're really going to be focusing on and starting on is the Keystone Avenue improvements, and specifically what we're talking about there is the bridge. So there's a lot which you'll hear some of today, and you'll continue to hear a lot of focus from the federal level on bridges. And so that's one of the major ones that the community's identified, not only in terms of its current situation, but probably more importantly, as far as the bridge, its state, as far as safety. So that one's there. Pembroke Drive widening, Sierra Street multimodal, and then lastly, South Virginia Street widening, I-580 ramps to Longley, which we affectionately call the in and out street. So those are the four that are the big ones that are going to be in design in this coming year. As far as construction, we're going to be starting, and we released the contract recently with Sky Vista, widening of Sky Vista, which will follow very closely on the heels of finishing off Lemon Drive. In addition, we're going to be moving forward with the Sparks Boulevard Phase 1 construction, which is essentially from the river, widening that road up from the river north to the freeway. In addition, as I mentioned, we will be completing Lemon Drive, Phase 1 of the widening of Lemon Drive. We're going to be starting construction on the roundabout at 4th Street and Mesa. And then we will also start the construction, completing the design and starting the construction of the new Peppermill BRT station on the east side of Virginia Street across from the Peppermill. We'll be completing, working very closely with Ndot, the McCarran Boulevard corridor study, updating and refining the travel demand model, and then also completing the Verdi area transportation study. We will be initiating or starting an active transportation plan update, which really is looking at all the components as we've been talking about earlier, in addition to just cars, but everything else that fits into the active transportation network. And we will be starting the Virginia Street Transit-Oriented Development Plan, which was funded by the federal government. And we received that grant in this past year, and we'll be moving that forward next year. We will very significantly begin to, after we present to you next month, what the changes are that are recommended for our transportation, our transit network. We'll be strategically implementing those over the next year. We will continue to focus on building our most successful program, not only from the standpoint of traffic congestion, but also for air quality, which is the Vanpool program. That's been very, very successful, and our goal is to really continue to ride the community's desire to use vanpooling or ride sharing, particularly given the situation we're in with gas prices. We'll be replacing 15 of our Access Flex Ride compressed natural gas paratransit buses, and we'll have 6 new ride fixed route electric hybrid buses. We're going to clarify and redefine our relationships with Ndot and the local partners. This is one that's kind of a constant theme, but we're going to do it with intent, sitting down and talking about what's the best way to move forward with the different roads that make up our network in terms of responsibility and leadership on each of those. We'll complete analysis of a very linked connection of transportation, which is housing opportunities along our BRT routes. And we'll continue our long-term property acquisition for the replacement of Villanova, which we started this year, and we have an actual request in for an earmark to help us with the planning fund. So in a very concise, short version, I've tried to touch on the highlights of the 30-plus goals we have for next year. So at this point, we'll be available, myself and the staff, to answer any questions about those goals or to add goals that you feel we need to add.
Very good. Commissioner Hartung, I'm going to start with you. Do you have any questions or comments about the goals?
I do. So I'm glad that we are. I'm trying to move back through them right now. Where are we? Sparks Boulevard Corridor Phase 1. So this goes back, and I'm not trying to beat on staff, but this goes back, Mr. Thomas, pre-Bill Thomas, to a scenario whereby we knew that an at-grade intersection at Gregg Street was not going to work. And we did not put in a grade-separated intersection, taking it all the way to the freeway. I know that at the time, everybody wanted to get this thing on the ground as quickly as possible, and stay inside of a budget, but this is a perfect example to how we could have pre-planned this and eliminated this on our goals and highlights. I do not see Pyramid Highway on here, so I don't know where we are with that widening. Is this right now, or is this going into 23, 24? What's the timeline on these projects, Bill? Sky Vista, Sparks Boulevard, etc.
So these are really forward-looking, so we definitely have a lot going on that maybe is not on here. On the Pyramid Highway one, it really is an Ndot project right now that we will follow and track. We can certainly capture it as an item, but I don't believe construction starts until 24.
Right.
I'll ask Brian to come up and maybe update you on that, because it is a very critical project to our community.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, and that's all I have for now, Madam Chair. I probably have more, but I won't take up a lot of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members have any questions or comments? I'll go to Mayor Sheepy, then Commissioner. Oh, I apologize. You're just standing right there, and I just tried to ignore you on your last day with us. How rude of me. Brian.
No worry. Brian Stewart, for the record, Director of Engineering. I just wanted to get Commissioner Hartung's question again regarding the schedule for the Sparks Boulevard project.
Pyramid Highway, I think.
Oh, sorry, the Pyramid Highway project. So we are on track. The project's moving forward. We will obligate those funds in the fall. That means we will advertise and get that project underway for the spring start, shovel in the ground in spring 23.
Nice.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Great feedback. Mayor Sheepy.
Yeah, have there any conversations? It's so hard to see if this is on.
I know, you have to put your
Is that
hand
just
kind of
me,
like
or
this.
just-
No, you have to put your hand in cup.
Yeah, and just because I'm new, so maybe I'm asking stupid questions, but like micro-mobility paths along the river, I mean, that could really go a long, long way and really start to get the lights on there so it becomes safe, but also really an area which people could truly commute. So I don't know if there's been that conversation. And then also, obviously, more protected bike lanes, those types of things. And then has there been any talk to do more of the green striping? It's just, I just noticed the difference from when you see the green versus when you don't. The drivers really are clueless, right? So, but there's just a lot of different components. So that was another aspect.
Short answer is, particularly in downtown Reno, there's a lot of effort going on right now as far as multimodal, and it falls out of what we did last year in terms of the study for downtown Reno. But we will capture that's part of the reason we have this here today. So I took a note of what you said, and we'll make sure in the goals we have that as an item for us to address, micromobility.
Yes, Commissioner Dare.
Yes, I just want to, so we were just talking about I actually had no idea what this Vanpool was, and it's one of your largest, and I only say this to the point of we were talking, it's the fact that I know nothing about it probably tells us how well we've marketed it, because I try to pay attention, and I'm in a lot of meetings, so I say this, that we'll probably really need to look extensively at what we're doing in advertising and getting these things out there. And obviously that does have a cost to it, but right now education probably might be our best investment. And I just would say that I know there's a lot of places we want to skimp on, but communication, and I'll just give a little speech on it, doesn't really happen unless you hear back from people. Just remember that. Just if you're ever teaching communication, if not, you can proclaim, but if you did not hear back from people, then we did not communicate. And so please, if we can make sure that we're hearing back, that people understand these things, I think you'll find all the investment you're making goes great, because I'm actually now want to hear more about this Vanpool thing, but we can do that on the side. But thank you.
Thank you very much. The one thing I didn't see in here, Bill, is I didn't see, and maybe this is just something you'll come back to us with the what the jurisdictional collaboration plan is for this sort of new model of, multimodal and capacity infrastructure. So we've talked about how we're going to expand that. We're going to get more strategic about identifying what is a capacity road versus a multimodal road. I didn't see that in here unless I'm missing something. What does that look like to you? How often are you meeting? How are we getting information back on what the jurisdictions are saying? Just kind of what that program is. I think that would be helpful.
It's in there on maybe without saying it, I glossed over it too quickly. So a lot of times we have these terms we use in the world of transportation that are transitory. So one day we're using micromobility, next we're using micromode, then we're saying, where we're going to capture this is our active transportation plan. That used to be called the bicycle pedestrian plan, but in reality, it's much bigger than that. So that's why we've renamed it to say it's not just about bikes and people walking, it's all of them. It's micromodes, so yes, it's there, it's just not the terms that maybe we would have used in the past. And that particular process we'll share with you, and it will be presented to the board as we move forward, but it'll be very large in terms of engaging.
Okay. We're just confirming, Commissioner Hartung, are you still on?
Yes, I am, Madam Chair.
Okay. We thought we might have lost you there for a second. I just want to make sure you're there. Thank you, Director Thomas. I think that's really, really important so that everybody's on the same page and on the same road, pun intended. The other thing is, I wasn't sure if I saw it on here. I know we've talked at length about two things: the expansion into the local roads, and what does that look like? RTC kind of getting into more of the maintenance of the local roads. What does that look like to RTC, and how is that being funded as a dedicated budgetary line item? I know that's important to the jurisdictions. I think we've talked about it quite a number of times, and what does that look like, and how are we going to get there? Also, we've talked about Ndot-owned roads and improvements needed on them, but the potential for RTC or the local jurisdictions working together to maybe expedite the improvements. And then, did I miss that on there? Was that a goal?
A lot of it, I think, is the way we word these things. So it's not a specific goal, but it is baked into both the community's network experience conversation we had, as well as the financial and organizational stewardship.
Okay, so that's something we'll get more information as a goal for 2023 on how. I'm going to use McCarran. It is my irritation point for 10 years that on our goal for planning is the McCarran Boulevard corridor study. We're going to study this road for all of 2023. Not a thing's going to be improved, which is so frustrating. 10 years in, I have beat this horse so many times that there's no horse left. And so my frustrations with a study, we've got to get past this. I'm just frustrated. I think I share Commissioner Hartung's frustrations on some of these things, but that one, to see it on here as a study for 2023 goals is irritating.
So perhaps the way we could capture it in the goals to move forward your desire would be specifically to focus on the Keystone McCarran intersection and just put that as a goal item, and we can work with Ndot because we're getting close to the end of that study. And I know there's frustration that it's a second, third time of studying it, but
even if it's an interim improvement to improve safety, that would be at least some movement in that very bad area that was identified years ago. I would almost argue decades ago. And so thank you if we could add that.
We will put it in. It will be our goal. We will obviously be working with Ndot to see how we might perfect that goal, but it'll be RTC's.
And Reno.
Yeah,
I think Reno has a vested interest in wanting to improve the safety. At the Kings Row and McCarran, kind of near the leadership area, to come out, people have to take a left and do a UE to take a right. I might be getting that backwards, but there's been some pretty significant accidents up there, and a lot of there's incredible growth going on up there, and it's just a bad area with high speeds and a curve, and it's bad news, and it's been bad news for a long time. So thank you very much for letting me voice my frustration once again. Okay.
We're doing frustrations. Can I ask something?
There she be.
The other area that is really in concern, and again, I don't know because I haven't sat here, so maybe you guys have like beat this dead horse too. But the one where I think it might be veterans. Is it veterans over there by Daybreak? Okay, and then we've got those really large trucks that come and then they go right into the residential area. Talking about diverting them up to South Meadows and going around instead of going right through all those homes, because we've had some real challenges over there and it's so dangerous. So
Is it Miraloma? Is that what's
yeah,
coming through?
is that right where it
I'm trying to
is?
remember if I got the right street. I'm not sure if I got the right.
It's back behind Daybreak, but if we could divert the big trucks to go to the right and go around, they don't need to go through that residential. And we've had some really significant accidents too. The other thing, just to clarify, Mr. Thomas, and you could probably do this much better than I can, but the role of RTC versus the city and who does what, and I'll sort of explain that, because I feel like sometimes, should we be jumping in over on the city side? Because that's not our lane, no pun intended. But how can we help you clarify, what that is? And so we do sort of push on our jurisdictional ends, so we're not sort of, I guess, overlapping where we don't need to.
I think for everyone who's involved, whether it's Ndot, the local jurisdictions, RTC, there's always issues and problems that go beyond our resources, so it is necessary, and it's part of what we've talked about in terms of our strategic plan to have those conversations. Okay. Because it makes no sense for the public to have 3 or 4 of us working on the same thing. If we can predetermine as best we can who's, using your word, lane it is, and then we all trust that entity to take care of it, that'll get us all a long ways. Yeah, and that's what we're looking at in our strategic plan, is having those conversations to find out, is there a better way to do this?
Yeah, that's really good to define it, because oftentimes we'll go like this, because I'll be very concerned about, a certain area, whatever, and they're like, oh, no, it's like this. So that would be really great to dial it down so we all know the map, right?
And I think to Mayor Sheevy's point, and this happens, and it's a frustration point for the community, not just on roads or infrastructure issues, but on a variety of things. When someone has a problem or a concern, they're not really caring who fixes it. They just want to fix.
That's right.
And I think the thing that gets most frustrating is when they get that's not an RTC or a Reno road, that's an Ndot road. You have to call them, and it's just like, can we all just figure out a path to just get it fixed? And I mean, we're doing that sort of collaboration with Ndot on another subject, where they simply just don't have the resources to deal with a lot of the homeless encampments that were on Ndot roads. And we, by working together and all the jurisdictions working together, at least at the city of Reno, we have come up with an agreement with Ndot where we will go out, send our Reno resources out to address the homeless encampments, to clean up the issue and to connect the individuals to services. And then we bill Ndot. And it works out great, because then we're not, that's not Reno's road, that's Ndot's road, and Ndot's trying to find people to go and address it, and that takes forever, and not faulting Ndot. It's a result of having strapped budgets and hard to get employees. So I just feel like we need to get there on the local roads, on everything. If Ndot doesn't have the bandwidth or whatever to fix the things like the North McCarran, then we need to find another path forward to fix it, because the problem isn't going to go away. And however that gets funded and paid for is another, arm wrestling match, I have no doubt. But we just can't let things linger for 10 years. That's just not a service to the community. Okay, horse is definitely dead. Okay, any other questions or comments? Commissioner Hartung.
Madam Chair, Thank you. And to your point, I could not agree more. You know, we are, like many agencies, guilty of paralysis through analysis. And that, I mean, we analyze and study forever, and by the time the study gets done, the parameters have changed. Traffic patterns have changed, and so it gets to be a little frustrating. So it would be good if there was a way that we could fast track, and I know that there are some federal requirements for various kinds of studies that are difficult to get around. They just take a lot of time, so I do understand that. But one of the things I also wanted to bring up is, and this was something our board approved, Madam Chair, and you're familiar with this, we approved a small line item in RTC's budget to do some neighborhood improvements to make them more multimodal, make them safer, almost like more of a complete streets program. Maybe that's one of the things that RTC also needs to look at on in some of these areas where we do increase the funding so that we can make some of those neighborhoods more user-friendly, more multimodal, and allow people to get around safely, and whether it's striping or the addition of bike lanes or et cetera, and let the municipalities deal with that, but still provide a funding source through, maybe it's even through RIF. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I think those are great comments and great goals. And I know traditionally RTC, when we've looked at a variety of roads, and Virginia Street was kind of an anomaly that was far more robust in its off-road improvements, for lack of a better term, between benches and sidewalks and trees and all those sorts of things. But I do think that when we start to get into these more defined, multimodal, designated roadways, which to me aren't these huge roads that are immensely long, and the McCarran Loops, as an example, again, they're the ones that are most safe for traversing on bike, on scooter, on foot. Those are the ones that probably should have more of those augmented street level improvements with the trees, because those are a break. Those are a safety, not just an enjoyable amenity and the smart thing to do, but maybe on those roads, those are the things that have more of those extras. And on the other roads, they're just not. I think we need to look at being strategic about that too. So, okay. All right. Item 5.2, we're looking for a motion to accept the report along with the comments from the board.
So moved, Hartung.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Great job. All right, item 6.1, Executive Director Report. Director Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, first, and you've already done, but I wanted to do it too, is to welcome Mayor Sheevy to our board. And glad to have you here. We'll miss Oscar, but we're glad to have you. So,
Thank you.
I then also wanted to, which you've talked about, Madam Chair, is start by sharing with the public, and I know the board's aware because I advised you that Brian Stewart has decided to make a career change and is moving into the private sector. This will be his last meeting. So I know you all, along with me, want to thank him for his 5+ years of service to RTC, a lot of important projects that he's led, a lot of good things he's done for our community, and my understanding he'll still be in the community, just serving a different role. So you may see him here at a board meeting, but he'll be wearing a different hat. So thank you, Brian. I also wanted to make a couple other acknowledgments. First, Elena Williams, who's here today, will be celebrating her 5-year RTC anniversary on July 10th. So where did she go? There she is. 5 years. Great to have you. Thank you for all you do. Very integral in putting our budget together and making sure that we stay financially, or we're good financial stewards. I'd also like to welcome our newest RTC employee, Michelle Crystal. Where are you, Michelle? There you are. She's been hired as our new property agent. And I know, Christine, I'm sorry that, it probably came an expensive Ndot because she's a former Ndot employee, but That seems to be the world we're in right now, but Michelle's, filling the space that was vacated recently. So we're looking very much forward to Michelle's contributions. There's a lot of important things, not only in play, but also coming forward. So she has public and private work experience and brings a lot of knowledge and skills that will really help us. So I'm sure you'll be welcoming her as you work with her. The RTC has launched the Verdi Area Multimodal Transportation Study. As part of the study, the RTC is seeking community input. The community is encouraged to take a brief 8-question survey to provide feedback about current and future transportation conditions in the Verdi area. The survey is open through June 30th and is available at rtcwashoe.com and on social media. On June 15th, the RTC and the City of Reno and community stakeholders celebrated the launch of the Micromobility Pilot Project in downtown Reno. The pilot project will improve access and connectivity for residents and visitors through micromobility-specific infrastructure in Reno's downtown designed for bikes and scooters. The pilot project will make it easier for the public to take advantage of more sustainable ways to visit downtown, the Truckee River, and the surrounding local businesses while enhancing road safety for micromobility users. I encourage everybody to head downtown and check it out. And I would add that it is a pilot project, so people using it and people providing comments are going to be key to its success in being a pilot to tell us how best to move forward in the micromobility world in the next year. The RTC will be offering free transit to the Nugget Casino Resort's Star Spangled Sparks event on July 4th. Event goers can take the Rapid Lincoln Line and Route 11, which go between Reno and Sparks. Both routes drop off at Centennial Plaza in Victorian Square. So you don't have to worry about parking. These routes will both be free starting at 4 p.m. So please visit rtcwashoe.com to plan your trip. The RTC, not surprisingly, is being impacted by inflation. While current construction projects are funded moving forward, the RTC has seen an upswing in bids prices for projects. Project costs that were estimated about even 6 or 9 months ago have seen approximately 20% increases. For example, the recent Sparks Boulevard Phase 1 project was originally estimated to cost around $5 million, but the lowest bid we got was at $11 million. So you can see it more than doubled in terms of what our estimate was for that project. The RTC continues to be fiscally conservative, which is why we can accommodate our current projects. However, over the long term, the RTC will need to evaluate our projects to see what we'll be able to fund in the future due to this high inflation that we're seeing on the horizon. The FTA's fiscal year 2022 triennial review of RTC was completed last month. Although not an audit, the triennial review is FTA's assessment of RTC's compliance with federal requirements determined by examining a sample of award management and program implementation practices. RTC had a very successful review, dropping to only 4 findings versus 8 in the last review 5 years ago. These 4 findings have been addressed and will be closed in the final report to FDA. So very proud of our staff for getting to what is a very rigorous review by FTA and assures that we're able to stay not only as a participating agency in the funding that comes from FDA, but also a leader in terms of their support when we ask for grants from them. After months of successful negotiations between MTM and the Teamsters, a potential agreement was reached and taken to the membership for vote on Sunday, June 12th. The membership passed the proposed agreement, and the union will now be finalizing the 4-year agreement into a signed collective bargaining agreement package. The new agreement terms would start on July 1st of this year. So on behalf of all of our staff and I'm sure the board and the community, we appreciate both MTM and the Teamsters for reaching this agreement and keeping our most disadvantaged citizens served by our access program. That concludes my comments for today.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, we will move on to item 6.2, the federal report.
Very quickly on the federal report, it's actually been fairly quiet right now. The only thing, which is not always the case, the only thing I wanted to, bring to your attention is that the Federal Highway Administration recently announced competitive applications for replacing bridges, which I know Ndot's very engaged in. That program, which is about $12.5 billion over 5 years, is designed to address economically important bridges as well as those in poor condition. So the 3 bridges that we're really looking at right now are, as I mentioned earlier, Keystone, Sierra Street, and then And then also, more recently, we've been having some conversations, which we will, at the City of Sparks on the Gregg Street Bridge. So those are the 3 that are kind of on our radar, and we'll be working very closely with Ndot to move forward on grant applications, likely for those bridges, if there's not money available through any of the formula funding. So that concludes my report from the federal side.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. At this time, we'll move on to the Ndot report. Director Swallow.
I know, it's so hard to see.
I think it's on. All right. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I have a couple of things that I wanted to add. It's not actually, there's no slides, just some things I was thinking about here. First, welcome, Mayor Sheevy. I'm glad to meet you, and I'm looking forward.
It's always been over Zoom.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to working with you.
Exist.
I do. I do. And then I was looking your goals, Bill, at the Vanpool. Actually, yesterday I have an all-team chat every other month with our team. We get between 600 and 800 of our team members on a Teams call, and I answer all the questions, and we have pretty extensive conversation. And one of the things that came up was, of course, the cost of gas. And I mentioned, there's a bus. There's a bus from Reno to Carson City, and we're going to be getting them more information about how to use that bus. Although I will note this morning when Darren and I carpooled in, that Summit Park and Ride is full. And that's new. It hasn't always been full. As you guys know, I ride the bus as much as I can, and hasn't always been full, but it is full now. And so that's a good sign. Hopefully ridership reflects that. But if it doesn't, it means people are carpooling, and that's also good. But I might be reaching out to you about seeing if we can get another Vanpool or 2 heading down to Carson, whether it's to our building or to the Bryan building. I think that might be helpful. And then last week at the Western Association for State Highway Transportation Officials, I had actually facilitated a roundtable discussion, and one of the participants was talking about wireless charging of EVs, and specifically in the transit space. And I know you guys are leaders in green transit, and so I might try to connect you with them. They had some it sounded like a really cost-effective way of doing it. I know Southern Nevada's been looking at it as well, and there's some challenges there, but it sounded like maybe they've been able to address some of those challenges, so I may try and get you in contact with them. And then lastly, I know that everybody here knows it's the Nevada Department of Transportation and not Nevada Department of Training. But, we do have the best team members, so if you got to come and poach from us because we have such a very strong team, I don't know that I can blame you, but it does make me sad when we lose team members, but at least they're out there and they're doing the good work, and Dale's out there laughing because he knows, and they're still serving the public good. So, yeah. All right, now I'm going to get into it. I'm going to, this month I have 3 safety slides, and I have to tell you the first slide, if you can see, I have a lot of comments on this first slide. So it's going to be a minute. I'm going to talk about safety for a minute, and I think it merits that I do that today. I mean, obviously I talk about it every week, every month, but my heart's a little broken right now, and I think we need to think about this and be strategic, and I don't know what the answers are, but you're going to hear from me for a bit on safety. So as we wrap up second quarter of 2022, as you can see, 144 lives have been lost on Nevada roadways so far this year through the end of May. That's down about 3% from last year, but Carson, Elko, and Pershing have all experienced increases of over 100%. Statewide, bicyclist fatalities are over 50% higher than last year, pedestrian fatalities 7%, motorcyclist fatalities 40%. I'll talk specifically about Washoe and Clark, but Washoe and Clark are both up significantly from last year as well. And we all know, those of us at least who've been sitting and been listening, that last year is not a year that we want to measure against. It was the worst year in over 15. So the numbers are not good. At Ndot, we're extraordinarily dedicated to stemming the tide of deadly crashes, and we're doing what we can. And so one of the things that we're doing you may recall I used to talk about specific crashes, and today I'm going to talk about a handful of crashes, but we're trying to pivot and talk about, well, what are we doing? Well, like, let's not just talk about the bad, let's talk about what we're doing. And so one of the things that we're doing, and this is kind of cool, is Federal Highways this past February advertised an opportunity for a safe systems pilot project. Over 50 organizations submitted. Ndot was selected as one of 8 to be in this pilot project. And so Federal Highways is bringing additional funds, and they're actually funding this study. And so we're doing this study with the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe out in Nixon. And we're excited. So the virtual kickoff meeting was held on May 2nd. And the first step in this pilot project is workshop and field review, which will help inform the stakeholders and allow them to understand the community needs, recreational traffic, and specifically Burning Man impacts in the area. So we're going to be out there during the Burning Man commute and really kind of looking at how that impacts the community of Nixon. Then we'll take the results of the pilot and pursue projects which aren't funded, so they'll have to go through the One Nevada plan. But it's exciting when Federal Highways comes to the table and helps us fund studies. And so we're excited about that, and really using the safe systems approach throughout the state to really make the network safe for everyone who's using the network. And then I mentioned when I opened on the safety that my heart's a little broken right now, and it's for a number of reasons. Memorial Day, we lost a team member on her own time vacation. That doesn't matter. We lost a team member in a crash. Last week on Tuesday, we had 2 team members struck by a passing motorist. I should say 3. One was in a vehicle. 2 were outside the vehicle. I'm sure you saw it in the news. They're both at home recovering, and they will heal. But it makes me think about the fact that they were far outside the travel lane when they got hit. They were well into the shoulder. And so what does that mean for the people that are out there on bikes, in a bike lane with a little bit of paint in between them and the car? What does that mean for people who are walking on a sidewalk in terms of how they might feel when I have team members that are well outside in the shoulder and they got hit, and one was care flighted? I mean, and they were doing their job, and they had all the lights, and there were multiple trucks, and there was really no reason for that to have happened. And then I think about, was it 3 nights ago? And I normally tell you about things that are in Washoe, and I'm sorry I'm telling you about things that aren't in Washoe, but they're in northern Nevada, so you see them on the news and we think about it. 2-3 nights ago when a kid lost his life on 580 in Carson. Another one is pretty broken in the hospital. Overnight, last night, we had a sweeping crew hit. They're going to be fine by a Ferrari that was, or Lambo, I don't know. It doesn't matter what they were driving. They left. They were going excessive speeds. I don't know how we change this. I don't know how we fix it, but we have to fix it. And I'm going to go to the Washoe slide because last month, and thank you, Neoma, for asking us to dive into Washoe also. Last month when I was here and we were reporting through April, Washoe County was almost 40% below. Now you're 13% up. 17 people. It's not the 144, where the numbers, the larger numbers we see in Clark, but it's 17 people have lost their lives. And I'll tell you that throughout the month of May and June so far, my team is texting me and they're telling me another person died. Another motorcyclist lost their life. It wasn't in a right-of-way, it was outside of our right-of-way. Our crews are responding. It's speed, impairment and speed. It's speed. The impairment might be leading to the speed. I don't know how we fix this, but when we were talking about the crash a couple nights ago with the kids, I have a team member, she has teenage daughters, and she was like, I heard there was a crash with kids, do you know them? Everyone in the Carson community knows those kids, right? So it's not just their parents, their immediate family, their friends, it's everyone. And that exists here too, right? When we lost our team member, she has a family, she has her friends, and she has all of her colleagues that liked working with her and are going to miss her. I don't know how we fix it. But I feel like we need to have a really robust conversation about those two specific behaviors. And not to say that 5 or 10 over is acceptable, because the speed limit exists for a reason. But when we're talking about speeding, we're talking about 100 mile an hour. We're talking about 90 miles. Like, we're talking about excessive speed. Truly, how do we fix this? I don't know. I'm interested in the conversation. I'm interested in hearing from anyone who's tuned in, watching the streaming, anyone who's sitting here in the room. I want to know how we fix it, because there's a lot that can be done via engineering. But if you're somebody who thinks that going 100 miles an hour on our road is okay, that's not engineering. And we have to fix it. Thank God our team members were safe. We're injured. We're only injured. Our team members are out there, and every day with this happening, I am scared to death of the phone call that I might receive. And that's not, our teams are out there doing so I don't know how we fix it, but it truly is heartbreaking if you step back and you think about it. And don't just look at it as 17, but look at it as 17 people, 17 families. I don't know. Speaking of speeds, I kind of want to remind everyone, Nevada has a basic rule for driving at reasonable and proper speeds. It's in the law, it's basic rule. It means that aside from the posted speed limit, or in addition to the posted speed limit, I should say, drivers by Nevada law must adjust their speed to be safe for the amount of and type of traffic, weather, road conditions, and other factors. Specifically, by law, drivers may need to reduce their speed substantially below the posted speed limit to be safe in certain conditions. Even aside from winter or work zone driving, which we all know, right? Winter driving, you go slow. Work zone driving, you go slow. It's just a reminder that we must also ensure that we're traveling at appropriate speed to give a safe sight and stopping distance, including, I would say, and especially when approaching a traffic signal. And I think about this like, there's those certain times of years when you're driving and all of a sudden you can't see anything because the sun is like right there. Well, guess what? That means you don't go 65 anymore. That means you go 25 or whatever the speed is to make sure that you can see what's in front of you and can stop appropriately. So just a reminder, this is extra bonus. This isn't even about like, hey, dude, drive the speed limit. It's sometimes you have to go slower. So do that. All right. Broadway relinquishment process. So Commissioner Lucy, I know he's not here today, but last month he asked about relinquishment of State Route 671 from Ndot to Washoe County. And, just a little bit of background, as Nevada's population and cities have grown, it happens like this, in this case, that a road which was once a state-maintained facility no longer really functions as a state-maintained facility. And it's really a city, or in this case, almost a neighborhood street. And so we have limited resources, so to help us focus on maintaining and providing for our corridors, our larger corridors, we have guidelines to help us in working with local government partners to relinquish or turn over ownership of these types of roads to cities and counties. We're always happy to review roads for potential relinquishment to our local government partners, and we appreciate the opportunity to work collaboratively with Washoe County on State Route 671. In the days after our last RTC meeting, our chief of our roadway group had an opportunity to meet with the County Public Works Director to start the discussions on the roadway relinquishment process for this specific corridor. And we'll work with them to evaluate and collaborate on the next steps to get the state route turned over to the county. And just want to thank Commissioner Lucy and our county partners for collaboration on this. We really want to make sure that the roads belong to the owner that makes the most sense, the ones that are actually controlling the access, et cetera. So happy to work on that with the county. Wanted to give you all an update on the advisory working group on long-term sustainable transportation funding. Sorry, we don't have a fancy picture. This month's meeting was virtual. Nobody needs to really look at a screenshot of a virtual meeting anymore, right? That's kind of like trauma-inducing at this point. So the group met together earlier this week on Tuesday, June 14th. And I should note, because we have we have a new member and a stand-in, so just for awareness, the advisory working group Ndot was tasked in the 2021 session to convene an advisory working group to look at long-term sustainable transportation funding. There are 29 members of this group, of which one is Bill Thomas. The RTCs are represented, the other MPOs are represented. The Reno Sparks Chamber is on the group. We have conservationists, we have energy, we have the business groups. It is a truly diverse couple state agencies, the ones that are most impacted in the space. Very diverse group that are working to try to figure out how do we ensure that the state has the funding they need to ensure that the system that carries 50% of all traffic and over 70% of heavy vehicle traffic can continue to maintain that network. So that's the purpose. On Tuesday, we took a deeper dive into the potential recommendations on transportation revenue options, which really look at near-term, long-term, and some flexible funding mechanisms. The group had an opportunity, it was a 2-hour meeting, and we made sure every single person at the meeting had, it was a 2-hour meeting, so they each had 2 minutes to say a few words about what they were feeling on the draft of the recommendations, so that the consulting team would have an opportunity to kind of take that in and edit and revise the drafts before we come back again. So everybody got to give a high level, and we did that intentionally because when you convene these diverse groups, it's one of the biggest challenges is making sure that you hear from everybody and that there isn't one or two voices that kind of take up most of the space in the room. So we wanted to make sure we heard, and we're very intentional that we heard from everyone. The mechanisms discussed on Tuesday were the fuel tax, revenue indexing, the GST, vehicle registration fees, and a mileage-based user fee. Also discussed in part was a delivery fee on tangible goods. And I just want to stop here and address that. The mileage-based road user fee is the one that is really kind of specifically being discussed and considered for EVs. And it may be that there's a short-term registration fee followed by a defined transition to a road user fee. But that's where we're looking at that EV space, beginning to collect revenue from EVs. But that also provides a very elegant transition. As the fleet transitions, you already have established a path moving forward and a sustainable path. So those were the mechanisms that were discussed a little bit. Again, draft recommendations were presented. Some of what they're looking into moving forward into September when our next meeting is, the financial piece of it, how much would each of those mechanisms raise at given rates. So there'll probably be rate tables that'll be part of the recommendation. The impact by household, really looking at who gets impacted the most and social and user equity in that space. Implementation costs, how much would it cost to implement these different revenue options? Because right now it's all of the revenue that is collected there's very low cost revenue at this point. So really looking at that. And then also some policy in terms of how do each of these revenue mechanisms perform against the guiding principles that the AWG developed, and then documenting any remaining issues that have to be addressed for the near-term and longer-term transition. So predictive models and other analysis will be closely evaluated as we solidify final recommendations for future transportation mechanisms. The next meeting will be in September. The meetings are open to the public. They follow open meeting law. We have public comments. We're very interested in hearing from anyone who has concerns or interest in this space. And overall, the study remains on schedule. It is due to be submitted to the legislature by the end of this year. And then in the next coming months, we're going to be working on the formal report drafting, refinements based on the feedback that was received, and again, looking at delivery later this year. But Ndot was tasked with hiring the group or convening the group, but it is, as much as it can be, a separate group that is really defining the recommendations. And looking at this, it's interesting. We hear the comment, like you're looking at raising revenue right now when gas prices are as high as they are. The legislature tasked us with convening a group to look at truly what is a long-term sustainability problem. And so the group is looking at all of the options that are on the table, what is available. I mentioned, you heard me say parcel delivery fees, right? So they looked very broadly, if you recall from several months ago, there were, I think, almost 30 mechanisms that were initially vetted before we got down to this smaller group. And so they're looking and they're thinking but they're really aware and cognizant of the fact that something does need to be done and a recommendation does need to be provided to the legislature. Ultimately, it will be in the hands of the legislature to decide what can or should be done and what the time frame on that is. And that will, I'm sure, include sensitivity to where we are at the time when we're in 2023. So we're looking forward to providing some recommendations to really ensure that there are roads to drive on for a really long time moving into the future, because whether it's an EV or my husband's 93 Ford Bronco, we all got to get somewhere, or a bicycle or a scooter. You know, we all have to get somewhere, and we need roads that are in good condition to do that. So that's the update on that. And then I think I have 1 or 2 project updates for you. I have 2, 3. I have 3. SBX. Whew. We're on the new southbound lanes. We're on 6 new bridges. So far, it's been about 18 months of construction. Crews are continuing to renovate the middle lanes of 580 from Spaghetti Bowl to Mill Street, and they will be doing that throughout the summer. And they're nearing completion on the new southbound I-580 2nd Street ramps, a milestone of the project. I bet if you drive it, you've been seeing the bridge and, you know, all the sound walls. It is getting done. We're super excited to see that, and looking forward to it opening here later this summer. As many as 1,500 vehicles enter and exit the freeway each hour between the interchanges, so the ramps will really help reduce that weaving, the panic if you got on and you're like, oh, I got to quickly get over while everybody else. So we're really looking at dividing that and improving safety and reliability in the network as we're able to open those. We've also, you may have also seen the landscaping and the aesthetic features coming to life on the southbound 580 near the Reno Sparks Indian Colony. It's part of our overall theming developed in conjunction with the Reno Sparks Indian Colony. The large basket structures recently installed, I actually haven't seen these, so Darren, we maybe got to go find them, represent the Great Basin Native American burden baskets, which were traditionally used to collect and transport pine cones and other products. With the new lanes, we have also, unfortunately, seen that drivers have picked up speed through the work zone. And we just remind drivers to travel safely and slow through inappropriate speeds through the work zone. We have workers out there, but also there's a lot of other cars that are navigating new transitions, and speed impairs your ability to stop if you need to. So really working to make sure everybody remembers to be safe in our construction zones. Pyramid Highway and Egyptian traffic signal installation. Just a quick update. So we began work on this project on June 6th. And do plan to wrap up by August. During construction, drivers will see daytime single lane closures in both directions of Pyramid Highway from 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., weekdays through early July. After 4th of July, we will transition to overnight lane closures until the project wraps up in late summer. We remind motorists to follow reduced work zone speed limits. Sorry if I sound like a broken record, but we got people out there working and we need them to be safe, and be prepared for minor travel delays and traffic switches through the work zone. As we all know, there is currently no traffic signal at the intersection, so the signal will provide dedicated turns to and from Egyptian Drive and Spanish Springs Lane, including dedicated turn lanes and median islands. It will also provide signalized crossing for enhanced bicycle and pedestrian access across Pyramid Highway, including for school children traveling to nearby schools, as you mentioned last month, Commissioner Hartung. And also a reminder, beginning next month, Ndot and the RTC will widen and improve segments of Pyramid Highway from Queenway to Golden View Drive. We're on schedule to bid that project out soon, with construction to begin next year. And then my last project update is the Mount Rose Corridor Study. And I just want to say that the corridor study is being finalized this month, and I want to thank our study partners, including the RTC Washoe, Washoe County, Washoe Schools, Nevada State Police, community members, and so many others for their collaboration in the study. From here, as you know, the study is a high-level master plan vision for the corridor and safety and mobility for all transportation types. The future improvements would be coordinated between Washoe County, City of Reno, RTC Washoe, and others, and will be prioritized through a One Nevada plan. And I know we've already been having conversations about who funds, how do we fund, and how do we prioritize. We've talked about our data-driven One Nevada plan process is really intended to help us make performance-based decisions to prioritize transportation projects and best meet the needs of our communities using the transportation system. I just want to remind everyone, we will be advertising a project for interim Mount Rose improvements this fall. The project will add median concrete islands and lengthen turn pockets and lighting improvements on Mount Rose Highway at Callahan. It will also improve lighting and reconfigure median islands and turn lanes to channelize and enhance left turns between the highway and Edmonton Drive. And a relatively new addition to the project is a protected shared use path on the south side of the highway connecting Thomas Creek and Edmonton to help with some of the school traffic that we've seen and also recreational. Overall, the project will enhance connectivity and safety as long-range improvements continue to be prioritized. And the interim project is in alignment with the overall corridor vision. So working to make sure that we're thinking through all of the needs on the corridor and making sure that we're developing a project that is what the community has asked for.
Thank you very much. That was a great update with lots of information and with regards, a couple of questions maybe or comments for the next board meeting. So you talked about the trends, of course, with the accidents. Accidents isn't the right, crashes. And I know that motorcycles were a number of them, and of course, speed and impairment you identified. I'm curious if speed and impairment were the same with the motorcycles as they were with the vehicles, or if there were some other contributing factors to that increase, and then how we in Nevada trend against national trends. Because I saw something on a national news outlet, I think a couple months ago, that pretty much was saying it's this sort of deadly trend is happening across the nation. And Director Thomas and I were just talking about maybe we need to look internationally at some efforts that have been deployed that have been effective to bring some of these excessive speeds in particular down. And then the other thing, I know when I first got on the council, I was part of a group that advocated for, and it got passed at the legislature, the ignition interlock devices. And I just have never heard any update on, are those frequently installed? I think it was for if you were on your second DUI or something, you had to have this ignition interlock device installed on your car as part of your penalty, I guess, and you had to blow into it in order to start your car. And I've just never heard any feedback from that. I don't know how many, is it having any impact? So maybe some update on that at the next would be great. But any support we can provide or input as the RTC with regards to this deadly trend and what the answers are, we need to have those candid conversations. And you're right, it's not always about, in these instances, it's not about the engineering. It's about, unless you're putting speed bumps on freeways. I mean, I don't know how you're going to bring the speeds down unless, I just don't know what the answers are. And the impairment is just an ongoing concern that we've not found the answers to that either, which is truly unfortunate. So with that, I'll open it up to other board members for questions or comments. Commissioner Dare.
Yeah, I have a couple. One is thank you for just your focus on our safety in our community. Obviously, it's not just your role, it's all of our roles. And you mentioned impairment. One of the things that I can't help but wonder is, I mean, some of the impairment we have to know is even our change shift up with marijuana. And I just encourage us to make sure we have an ability to actually govern and actually stop that as well. And I know that's difficult to do, but we can't stop. We can't put things in our society and say it's okay that we do not have means to control or govern. So I'll put that on the record, and I think that's could be something to look at. I do want to say, and it's good to see you in person, and I say this, but I want to share my heart with you as something I was pretty disappointed in, and I think you might have heard from your staff of my disappointment. And it's the process more than the end, because I know we all have different responsibilities, and it has to do with the advance warning on pyramid. And here's my concern. It's not just that I don't like the idea. There's a lot of ideas I don't like, and I don't win, and that's just how it goes. But the process went that it was a decision made without our input. The decision was pushed, even with our input, that I don't believe there's an elected official that supported you guys in that from up north, but it still happened. And I don't understand that, and I don't understand how an engineer or somebody who lives wherever they lived make a decision for our region when you have people who represent people here, and we're telling you no, and that happened. So with that said, it's done, and it's moving forward, and that it happened. I did meet with your staff. I got the answers that they gave me. I still told them I did not like it. They pushed hope in the future. Decisions like that should not be made outside of elected officials. I think that it's
it's wrong and it's not how we should be structured, especially when we work together in so many other ways. And so all of a sudden to have something that's like, nope, this is what we're doing, was out of character, in my opinion, from what I see our work with you, and but very frustrating on that end. So let me just share that. And then I do have a question on some of the things. When you come off of coming from Sparks, and you right now do have the construction on the improvements on Spaghetti Bowl and everything, is there any way to extend the entrance onto the 580? It is, I take that all the time because I'm coming from Sparks, heading over to see Hillary Sheevy, our mayor, of course. And but when I'm taking that off, it's just a really short entrance, and you have to, so you're taking the turn.
The west to south?
The west. So I'm coming from Sparks. I'm actually going to go out towards Carson City. So yes.
The west to south?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're coming on, there's you have this much room to make sure there's nobody in that lane. And sometimes people, you talk about speed, there are sometimes I'm like, whoa, like you almost have to slow down enough and cause an accident behind you. And I know that shouldn't, all that's changing anyway. You're moving forward, but in the midst of construction, it just seems like there's not enough lead time to even know what's to the left of me. And I don't know what kind of accidents have been there or if everyone's been fine. It just seems like a dangerous spot to me.
I'll ask the contractor if there's anything they can do in the interim.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Mayor Sheevy, and then we'll go to Commissioner Hartung if you have any questions or comments.
Yeah, Vice Mayor, just really quickly, are we working with zero fatalities over here quite a bit still? So maybe they come back. I mean, honestly, I know you have too, and we have done this over and over and over again about pedestrian fatalities, and everything I've read is all education, education, education. And I wonder too about, I think, especially in our elementary schools, if we're in there sort of pushing it, maybe doing coloring contests, and then they're taking that home to their parents, and you know what I mean? Like, I always say early and often, but some of that kind of stuff, but I do think we gotta get back on to, because we were doing pretty good for a while.
Yeah.
And we were making some good headway, but it's tragic because it doesn't have to happen. That's what's so tragic about it. And then the one thing is also, I really would like to, and I know people hate this, but I honestly think in our neighborhoods, the speed limit should be 15. I do. I really feel strongly about that. It's more on the city side, but I've been working with Brian Sudi. We've had some success in some neighborhoods, but I think every neighborhood should be 15 miles an hour. We don't need to be speeding, everywhere all the time to get to places. That's actually how accidents really do happen. And they say the worst ones are the ones closest to your house. Well, why is that? Because we're so distracted. So we gotta slow down. So either that or what kind of fines can we give? Maybe, there's some ramp up on some pretty strict fines or something. I don't know, but we got drastic times or drastic measures. One is too many. Yeah, one is too many. One is too many. So, okay, thank you so much.
You bet. And I know in speaking with Director Thomas that, some of the European countries have, and I know this is to some unpopular, but they have deployed cameras and really hefty fines for excessive speed in various areas, and it seems to be working. And again, I know there's pros and cons to that, and people don't like that, but clearly something different has got to be done because what we're doing isn't deterring the behaviors. Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to your point on that, Arizona's had that for a long time, those camera speed traps. But I believe it violates state law, and so I'm not positive of that, but that's what I've been told in the past. But let me start by Director Swallow thanking you for the improvements at Sunset and Egyptian. Those are much needed safety improvements in that area. The citizens, I know some of the citizens going north-south will be annoyed by it, but those citizens who live on each side in those subdivisions will be thrilled with it. And so thank you. Those are long overdue, but much needed. There is a rumor out there talking about and I have not heard this from anyone at Ndot. No one's discussed it with me, nor is, to my knowledge, has discussed it with our staff. Is there a move to also go back to the 45-mile-an-hour speed limit through the center of Spanish Springs?
I don't know. I'll
Okay.
find out.
Okay.
If you're hearing rumors, you just shared the rumor with me, so I will look into that.
And rumors are just that. You see those things on Nextdoor, and if you do not have enough time, nor do any of us, to go through all the rumor that shows up on social media constantly. So, but sometimes they'll talk to someone at Ndot. They'll have a conversation, and they'll divulge that those are the discussions. So I have not heard it, but if you could find out, that'd be wonderful. And then I wanted to thank you for the Mount Rose Highway studies. Commissioner Lucy has been pushing for safety improvements on the Mount Rose Highway since he's been on RTC for now, nearly 8 years. And so those are definitely much needed, and again, I will say long overdue. It's a very changed corridor, so thank you for that. You mentioned about the relinquish, and I'm going to go back to my slides here so that I don't get myself screwed up here. The relinquishing program to the roadway relinquish process. When you do that, let's just say SR 71. When you do that, do you also give us the funding that was associated with that roadway, or does that become the responsibility of the municipality that the road was relinquished in?
It's a negotiation in terms of, and we follow state process in terms of that. It's been legislatively directed. Typically, if it's not a corridor exchange, a lot of the times they're corridor exchanges, but if it's not a corridor exchange and it's just a corridor, so for the instance, this one, 671, we're required.
671, my bad.
Yeah, we're required to bring it up to a state of good repair or provide the agency funding to do so. And then, then it's a negotiation of what that cost would be to bring it up to a state of good repair.
Okay, thank you so much on that, because I know that'll end up being a question that we'll have to answer for constituents. And then the final thing, and Councilman Dare touched on it, I'm still getting people contacting me who are frustrated with the situation on Pyramid and the removal of the advanced signal warning systems. I just footnote, just so that you know, there's still a lot of people out there that are very, very frustrated with it. And that's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. At this time, that's the end of the Ndot report. Do we have any, moving on to item 7, any commissioner announcements and updates?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Hartung.
And I've had this discussion with Mr. Thomas. The Northern Nevada Central Labor Council has asked us if we could give consideration, and I'll read what they sent. They said that they're actually I won't read it, I'll paraphrase it. The Northern Nevada Central Labor Council is hosting a Labor Day festival, which would be on September 5th at Idlewild. It's a non-political event. It's just about apprenticeships and workforce and et cetera. And they're wondering if RTC can participate in some way with transit assistance. And so maybe we can have that conversation or bring something back, and we can have them come before us if necessary and do a short presentation as to what the event would look like and what their actual ask is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, do any other commissioners have any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move on to item 8, closing public comment. We do have one. Lori Rodriguez. Good morning.
Good morning, Lori Rodriguez for the record. You were talking about the developments and the roads and everything. And I know that when the developments are going in, no matter where they are in Washoe County, they have to go before the Washoe Planning Commission. I was wondering if we could flip-flop the requirements that the developer must submit their plans to Ndot and RTC in a timely manner to let them review them and comment, and then make that part of the Planning Commission book, I don't know what you call it, agenda, so that they can see that Ndot and RTC have had a chance to review it. Now, this would have to have a good lead time, 3 to 4 months at least, and a proof of receipt by the two agencies. So the developers don't go running to you a week before and say, I need this next week. That wouldn't work. They would have to be able to come to you, especially in the North Valleys, for example, the Cold Springs developments. You can bet dimes to donuts they're going to go in and then come to Ndot and say, we need our own freeway access. And again, you're reacting. And I think if they have to prove they have submitted the plans, they have been reviewed with a reasonable lead time, that should become part of the Planning Commission approval. I don't know the legalities. I don't know who the agency would be that would have to change the requirements. I'm sorry, I don't have anything prepared. This is kind of off the cuff. Basically, that was it. Maybe you can discuss it on, Christina would maybe want 5 months. Maybe you would want 4 months. But they would have to have proof of submission so that they're not trying to do it, in a week's time. The other thing, since I have a few seconds, in answer to your question, what can be done about speeding? I do know that the newer cars can be programmed with speed regulators, and I only know this because the NHP troopers have had problems catching the speeders who are going over 100 miles an hour because their cars are automatically slowing them down at 95. And I know this because my husband was the technician for these cars, and the troopers were coming unglued because they could only sit and watch the person speed away. This would be part of the new car manufacturing, and perhaps the transportation directors of all the states can start talking to the manufacturers and the federal government saying we need regulators maybe at 75 miles an hour, 70 or 70. And I don't see why they're building cars that can go 140 when these people don't know how to drive at that speed. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments. Great comments. Okay, Madam Clerk, I don't believe we have any further public comment.
Madam Chair, we do not.
Okay, we're on to item 9, looking for a motion to adjourn.
Woo-hoo, I move.
Okay, second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.